Hi everybody, me again on a walk, and today I want to talk about why South Africans shouldn't date or marry foreigners. Now I'm going to be doing quite a bit of generalizing here, but for the sake of argument and from my observations in my life, going to first world countries, or as they are called nowadays, developed countries, and being a South African and living in a so-called third world country, or as they nowadays call it, a developing nation, I've picked up some serious differences between my country and the people in my country and the people of what I would call first world countries. And as I said, I'm going to generalize, but for the sake of argument, I do believe that a lot of what I'm about to say holds water. So if you're a foreigner from a first world country, developing nation, or a South African, it would be interesting to hear your comments and hear what you have to say. But yeah, these are the reasons why I believe South Africans shouldn't date or marry foreigners. Now, on average, I believe that South Africans have suffered more than most people in developed nations, and that makes you much more patient. Why? Because you've got no choice. You have to be patient. It also makes you more humble. It also makes you persevere. You don't have the luxury of just giving up. It makes you help others. It makes you help the people around you. It makes you see that there are people around you that are struggling and they can't do it on their own, in their own might and their own power. So it makes you a much more, how can I say, altruistic person. Whereas what I've experienced in first world countries is that even though first world countries have much more resources, people are in general much better off financially. They're way less willing to help each other in those countries. It also makes you more sensitive to the needs of others for the reasons that I've just mentioned. It makes you more sensitive, as a human being. Makes you less reliant on money. You realize that money isn't everything, and that there's more to life than money. It also makes you less reliant on pleasure. Makes you less reliant on opulence. Also less likely to resort to escapism of some form, shape or size. It makes you less sort of reliant on yourself or social position. It makes you less reliant on power and perceived superiority. There's way less of that I perceive in South Africa than what I've perceived in a first world nation, such as those of Western Europe, say the US, Northern America, and those sorts of places. Foreigners have suffered less, as I've said. So they rely on self more, and they rely on their intelligence, their own intelligence. They rely on their families, usually wealthy families. They rely on wealth, their own wealth usually, or the wealth of those around them. They rely more on the government They rely on their social circles. They rely on their own status and other tangible things like that. Foreigners have more options. They have more breakfast options, they have more lunch options, they have more career options, study options, lifestyle options, wardrobe options, partner options, and the list goes on and on. So all these options available makes it much more difficult to stick to things, regardless of what they are. Foreigners also seem to be more entitled. They believe the world owes them something, and they believe that they are better than others. Foreigners love comfort, and they can afford it. They can afford it. Every kind of tech to make your life more comfortable, every kind of convenience and luxury to make you feel physically, emotionally, and spiritually more comfortable. Yeah, like I was saying, foreigners have tons of backup options. So when something runs low or runs out or stops working, they just switch the current thing for another thing or a new thing. That could be the contents of their fridge or fridges, or the contents of their friendship circle, or the contents of their character, or the contents of their family, pretty much anything. Everything is replaceable, upgradable, expendable, and temporary, especially when it becomes a little uncomfortable. To compromise, sacrifice, or go without is seen as weakness. The tendency to look down on you because they think they're better than you because of your lack of or disinterest in material things is also a problem. They automatically assume that because you have less and are not ambitious or are inferior in some way. So yeah, mistaking having less for a lack of ambition or inferiority. Definitely one of those that's up there. The thing is, they haven't been in a position where they've lost everything, or most of everything, and they've never been truly hungry, alone, destitute, broke, humbled, shamed, abandoned. Most people only find Christ in a position like that. And when you have nothing left to lose and everything to gain, they've never been there. That's when most people grab onto the thing that they've been avoiding their whole lives at all costs. Foreigners think they are all going to live to be 90, 100 years old. Yeah, we know that life is fleeting, temporary, and there's no guarantees. Your life can be demanded of you at any minute. So we are a little more likely to live for things that matter, like family, friends, and faith, as opposed to wealth, self, and ambition. South Africans have developed a greater ability to be content with what they have, in spite of what their circumstances have handed them. And they have, to some extent at least, learned the secret of enjoying their lives, regardless of those circumstances. Foreigners seem to always be looking for something better, something faster, something more exciting, something bigger, something younger, something newer, something tastier. They call it ambition, but I call it discontent. I know I've generalized a lot here, but as I've said, for the sake of my argument, I do believe what I'm saying still holds truth. See, the fundamental problem is a schism in worldview and outlook in life. And that schism may make you look, as a South African, to a foreigner very attractive. What might make a foreigner to you as a South African look very attractive due to those differences. But long term, you're dealing with two fundamentally different worldviews that have been created through different circumstances and different general levels of difficulty and suffering. And as I've discussed in a previous video regarding mixed marriage, mixed religion marriage, such opposing worldviews are very, very difficult to reconcile, especially long term. So that's why I think South Africans shouldn't date or marry foreigners. Drop a comment if you wish. Thanks for watching.